everyone, thank you for listening. I'd like to thank Andy and his wife have been here the last 6 months and made a lot of progress. We have a new website, Instagram, podcast room. I like the sign. The sign reminds me of my mother's hometown.
Yeah.
It could say Utica Club. That's where the real people are from, Utica, New York.
Yeah, if you're just listening at home, you got to check out our YouTube channel so you can check out the sign.
Well, the other thing
Had some fun with it.
Well, we're starting with this microphone here. It reminds me, I know you're a big movie buff.
Yep.
Rambo 2.
Yes.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Murdoch, I'm coming to get you.
One of the best movies ever.
For intellectuals. And some of the young people probably don't know, but yeah, you have to be a real deep thinker to watch the Rambo series.
Yeah, it was Rambo First Blood Part 2.
And Rambo and Rocky, I believe. They're cousins. They sound the same.
Exactly.
What do you got?
Yeah, but with that sign, with the logo, I had one of our coach friends a couple weeks back. He wrote in and he said, "Man, I finally just realized that the logo is actually part of a tennis court."
Well, your friend, Cade Garrett.
Cade Garrett, yeah, Unicity Design, shout out.
Yeah, you had me talk to him on the phone, and I talked to him about building blocks. That's how you really have to start, just like math. You've got to be able to count before you can add, and add before you can subtract.
Mm-hmm.
And that logic should really help in tennis teaching. So it's the building blocks. It's also the 3 zones of the court, red, yellow, green. Most importantly is the base, the largest piece of the building blocks, and blue represents truth.
Yeah.
Fact-based instruction for long-term development.
Yep.
So there is a story behind the logo.
Yeah, and Kay was a tennis player too, so he understood what we were.
Yeah, the building blocks
getting after.
And, the GreatBase. We can talk a little bit about the name, the GreatBase.
Yeah, where did that name come from?
Well, talk about the history of the GreatBase. It goes back to 1981 for me. I really think about it. But there's even, then I talk about the...
Stay on that mic, Rambo. Episode number 1. You gotta kiss that mic.
Gotta be close to the mic. The name. The history, but the name. We haven't always called our curriculum the GreatBase. The United States Tennis Association, governing body of tennis in America, started calling the early childhood development program Quick Start.
Right.
So I was writing for Lifetime Tennis, a magazine now that's no longer in existence, defunct. But it was distributed out through Canada, and Richard Hernandez is a longtime friend, associate, going way back. We studied tennis together. I was the teacher and he was the student. Mm-hmm. So Richard read the article, the title. It's not a quick start, it's the right start. I mean, you can't microwave tennis.
Right.
It's not instant coffee. So he said in the conversation, tennis needs a great base initiative. Let's just say that again. I had him say it 3 times. Tennis needs a great base initiative. And from that point forth, we started calling our program, the curriculum we've assembled, the information, ideas, insights, the GreatBase. And the thought is, who can argue with a GreatBase? A mathematician, a musician. Every discipline starts with a GreatBase.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. We talk about how it's a system of systems. And I've really liked that because we always say that a system is an organized plan. And, just like the alphabet system, the numeric system with mathematics, you got to build up, but it's an organized plan. And I think, you said people can't argue with having a great base, but also you can't really argue with having a developmental plan, a systematic plan for improvement. And so, a system, some people, freak out about a system as one way or whatever, but really just basic fundamentals.
A system to explain the parts of the racket, a system to explain the grips,
right.
A system to feed, a system to videotape.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the NFL. It's systematic. We're going to work together. We're going to be a team. The offense has to understand the defense. And
organize.
Working on this together. A blend of methods. Basically, it's really a matter of studying methodologies and studying tennis teaching masters.
Yeah, and I know, not to toot your horn, but for me personally, one of the reasons why I wanted to move here, the last 4 years I was in Germany with my wife, and but to work with you, because of your history that you have with some of those master teachers. So maybe you could talk about some of those people that you've had one-on-one experience with, not just read the book.
To digress, Andy met his wife. We were running, Andy and I, we were running a tennis camp in Germany, Dusseldorf.
Yeah.
David Squire, Australian coach who lives in Dusseldorf. Mark Hammond, American coach who's in Berlin. They helped us put it together. We had 25 kids from 9 countries, and that's where you met your wife.
Yeah, sleeping on a blow-up mattress from...
Yeah, it's interesting. You tell people we're going to have a tennis camp and where we're going to stay, where you cut out the hotel expense.
Yeah.
And you get an air mattress, and the boys go to the left, the girls go to the right, and they sleep on air mattresses.
Yeah, on the carpet courts is actually really fun.
But if people spend a lot of time in Europe, it's quite common in the summertime where a European kid gets on a train, goes to a nearby city, and stays at the tennis club, just brings a sleeping bag.
Yeah. Yeah, that was didn't expect it to happen, but...
Yeah, I grew up in a hockey household right next to the Canadian border on the American side. Father was a civil engineer, but he was a student of hockey. We were all students of hockey from a large family. I think you certainly have the opportunity to learn more lessons if you're from a large family. But my oldest brother, he was getting his PhD in Russian studies along the time, 1972. It was actually before that, but shortly after, within the 70s, he started studying Russian hockey. And I think we should get into the tennis teaching masters you asked about, but so that's what my journey was. Okay, my older brother said, whatever you do, try to surround yourself by people who know a lot more than you do, and that's what I did. So yeah, systematic hockey systems.
Now you're hanging out with me.
Yeah. You don't like hockey?
I do like hockey. I do like hockey. Hockey. Did you grow up saying a lot?
Well, I used to wish I was Canadian, so yeah I said it a lot.
You said, hey.
The reason I wished I was Canadian is that college hockey was just, the Americans until the U.S. Olympics, there was a lot of Canadian kids who played American college hockey that weren't given a look, but also a lot of Americans weren't given a look. In fact, I have a name tag with my name on it. It's framed. It's in a glass frame. My sister-in-law gave it to me because I went out for a college hockey team. I made it, but all the name tags were already ordered from the Canadians trying out for the team. But one of my other brothers, he had played on the team and with a last name like Smith. So I was fortunate to have a name tag when I made the team. But no, 15 years of hockey, it's very much part of what I do. But the tennis side, opportunity, when luck and preparation meet. I used to hit balls with the late Eugene Allen. He was the president of the board of trustees at Tyler Junior College. And I hit balls with him selfishly in one sense, because when you're a young tennis teacher and you're in your 20s, people just ask you, how good are you?
Yeah.
And you go out, you want to play anybody and everybody. But he knew that I had, gone to great lengths studying tennis. So he had set up a program for dental hygienists, and he gave me the opportunity to revise an academic curriculum, comprehensive curriculum for tennis teaching pro managers. So that happened when I was 26 years old. So I was working with Vic Braden in California at the time, and I had made arrangements to go to Europe. I would have worked in Marbella, Spain, in the winter, and Reidenwinkel, West Germany at that
pretty
time.
Good
in the summer.
Pretty good accent.
But ich spreche Deutsch. But so I had a clause, if Eugene Allen had made it happen for me to go to Tyler, Texas, I did. And I'm 26 years old. I show up. I've got 2 shoulder bags. And the one thing, and that's really where the GreatBase started. It wasn't called the GreatBase, but in 1981, I had already been trained by Dennis Vandermeer, Welby Van Horn, and Vic Braden.
Yeah.
And I spent years with all 3 of them, but through Dennis, we were fortunate to have Jim Verdick, with team teaching, team coaching. James Lair with the sports psychology. With Welby Van Horn. I worked for a company that was founded by Nick Bollettieri, All American Sports. And I was transferred from a junior camp to an adult camp. And it was at a week in Stowe, Vermont, where there was a pro tournament. And Joe Brandy, who coached Sampras when he won his first Grand Slam, he was there, and his younger brother, Andy Brandy. And so we're all in our earlier mid-20s. Andy and I he's 2 years older than I am. And he kept telling me, Welby Van Horn is the best. Welby Van Horn is the best. So by that time, I was asked to be a director for All American Sports in the summertime. And I did that. But then afterwards, and at that time, my father was saying, I'm the youngest of six. My youngest is the smartest. He's spending the winters in Florida and the summers in New England. But I remember telling my father, I'm going to go work for Welby, and I was paid very little. And then I'm going to go work for this guy by the name of Vic Braden for free. I'm going to be a volunteer. And, that's not gainfully employed. But Andy hooked me up to work for Welby. And then also through that, a number of our students did internships with Harry Hopman. I didn't directly work with Harry Hopman, but he certainly opened his doors. And of all the people who used to call me, it used to kind of stop my tracks when Harry Hopman would call. And then with Vic, Vic became a big fan of Bill Jacobson with statistics. And then lastly, one of the 8 pillars we mentioned is Peter Burwash. Peter, a Canadian, grew up playing ice hockey, but also he was the number 1 player in Canada at one time. He was the first named pro, called me up, came on his own nickel, and that really got the ball rolling. So we ended up having a lot of visitors. We had one every month. And I lived in this town, college town, a nice place, Tyler, Texas, from 81 to 91. But that's where I would say that's where the GreatBase really started, because I had this opportunity to train tennis teachers, train juniors.
Yeah.
We ran down the campus clinic. It was like $1 clinic, $1 a day,
Yeah.
$1 a time. So, we could talk about those 3, but if I just went through the 8, I would say the 3 are very much like, for me, the Christmas tree and everything. The others are like a very, very important decoration.
Yeah, ornament.
Yeah, but Vic is the stand. Vic Braden's the stand because, just like the logo blue, fact-based instruction.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what you think. Tell me what you know.
Yeah, he did all the research.
Yeah.
Or a lot of it.
Yeah. And,
he's a pioneer.
And I know you spent so much time with Vic. I tell people that you spent more time with Vic than anybody but his wife, his widow, Melody, the last 10 years of his life. But
yeah,
he was very misinterpreted. When I worked for Vic, he was on Hollywood Squares. He was on talk shows. He was a superstar, rock star.
Yeah.
But I think that's a sad note with tennis teaching is there's not enough appreciation for tennis teachers that have gone before us.
Yeah, you got to know the history. I think the coolest part, we'll have to go on another episode with your experience in Tyler at such a young age, tennis tech, but that was the first program of its kind, really, for tennis teachers. And now there are several, but that was the first one ever, really.
Yeah, we Americans have to be careful. It's like I lived in Tampa for 15 years, and we're the lightning capital of the world, but actually Cairo, Egypt has more lightning than Tampa. So for us to say we're the only tennis teaching program in the world, we certainly were in North America. But I think that's another sad note, that certification doesn't mean education. I tell people in this country, you can't really be opinionated and be negative towards the governing bodies of tennis unless you're part of the governing bodies of tennis, like the USPTA, the PTR. I've been a member of those organizations for, I'd say one 42 years, and on the other, I'm guessing 39 years.
Gosh, you're old.
But I was a tester, best by test. So, you worked with some of the students that I trained.
Yeah, I started tennis was probably 10, 11, but when my family, we moved back to California. I'm from California originally. We moved back to the Mission Viejo area, Orange County, and just really out of luck. My mom would say heavenly choreography, but we ended up out in Costa de Casa, just kind of checking it out. And Steve Campbell, who was a student of yours, was my first coach at the Vic Braden Tennis College. And we didn't have a lot of money for tennis. I always had the shoes with the socks flying out of the toe, with Shugo for a month. So funny to think about that. But no, I was really lucky. They gave me a work scholarship so I could do odd jobs around the facility and get to hang out with Vic. I remember organizing his film room. This is when I was 13. And I could do group lessons for twice a week and then play there as much as I wanted. So I really spent a lot of time there just kind of hanging out like a gym rat and got to experience there. And then later on went to train at his facility in southern Utah. We moved back there and then started teaching in my early 20s and was with him, those last 10 years doing all kinds of projects, research. And I was really, really fortunate just to shadow Vic.
I like to tell people I have total recall. I recall totally what I want to. So in southern Utah, Jennifer Roberts, Dave Nostrand, Mark Jakes.
Yeah. I mean, Dave was there, and it's kind of the same situation. He gave me a scholarship where I could just go there and, get up early in the morning and blow the tennis courts off and fill the water jugs and the cups up. And, I was a senior in high school and was able to train there, just use the facility, use the ball machine. And so I was able to get those reps in. So Dave was really my first, mentor. Al Tomlinson, I haven't heard from him. I hope he's still alive and kicking. He was a coach of mine there and a great guy. And, but, he was my first real mentor into the information. And that's where I got to know about you because he had all the tennis tech material. So I knew of you, but hadn't spent time with you. But the first time I did, it was a cool experience because coming from Vic, he's such a nice guy and really, just was concerned about people's feelings and how the brain worked. And then I came to visit you and it was like, oh, okay.
I was very flattered. I flattered when Vic would say that, Steve, we need to work together. And I said, that's very flattering. He was talking about brain types. And I said, no, what we need to do is work together. You go forward with a flashlight, make all these discoveries, and I'll walk backwards and hit people over the head with a club.
Exactly. No, for me, it was really, refreshing to go, okay, from this end of the spectrum and then to the other end of the spectrum where it was like, some real coaching that the way you speak to players is not always seen at your day-to-day country club. And I think, obviously your hockey background and it's honesty because...
Yeah, I'm from the 60s. Or if you drop the ball, I tell a story about I was playing Pee Wee football, Pop Warner football, and I was all alone in the end zone, and I dropped the ball. What do you have, like 12 years old, 11 years old, and the tears are coming down. That was on the game day on Sunday. By the following day, I had a sticker put on my helmet that said, couldn't catch a cold. Yeah, it's a tough love. I mean, there's three types of love: soft love, tough love, and crazy love.
Yeah.
But with Vic, I'm just like everybody else at that point in time. Tennis boom. James Van Allen, VASS, VASS. He invented the tiebreaker, and the tiebreaker put tennis in a time capsule where it could be on TV. So the finals used to be on in the summertime, and the tournaments were on clay because 75, 76, and 77, U.S. Open was at Forest Hills. It had changed from the grass, and it was on American Hard True. That's where Jimmy Connors, you read that he won the U.S. Open on 3 different surfaces. Yep. But Vic did these 1-minute commercials on PBS. There was only 3 TV stations, and there was a 4th. And there was times in the 70s of the 4 TV stations, tennis could be on 2 out of the 4. It was like boxing boomed in the 50s. So that was my first introduction to Vic. And then 77, he wrote a book, Tennis for the Future, with... I was a perennial tennis bum of Boca Raton, Florida. I was told if you're going to be a tennis teacher, you have to learn to play. And I certainly enjoyed that. I mean, I would say that would be the first segment of my tennis career is I was a full-fledged tennis bum, supported myself at night, hit balls all day. But I didn't learn through osmosis. So then I found out the more I read, the more I listened, that's where I have empathy for people that are poorly taught. So I volunteered for the Boca Raton Tennis Association, and I went to them all. And I'm not, as you know, mechanically inclined, or I'm not a techie. So I had to do it for 2 days, and it was fantastic. I showed a film that was made in 1975, Go for a Winner.
Yeah, I love it.
Vic Braden on doubles. So my job was to sit there and watch it, and then rewind the tape and reload the tape, which made me a little bit nervous first. But after I did like the first 3 or 4 times, I had a little.
Got it.
I had a little confidence. But so I listened to that so many times over a 2-day period that I said, I'm in. This guy, I thought this guy was just funny.
Yeah.
Uncle Vic, the short, little, fat, funny guy.
Yeah.
He was, to me, a professional comedian. But because of that, it wasn't my intellect by any means. It was repetition. Is that I, unlike most, I realized that it was not the presentation; it was the information.
Yeah.
And he was, and to this day, he's way ahead of the curve. Even now, I always say there should be a book written. Vic Braden is missed because he was such a great human being. But Vic Braden, I got it wrong. Vic Braden is missed. Vic Braden was missed. He was missed.
Yeah.
Because people just didn't zone in on the information.
Yeah.
I'm a Vic Braden fanatic, and I know you are. May 10th, 1976, Sports Illustrated. And in my house, my parents used to get Time Magazine, Newsweek Magazine, and Sports Illustrated. And believe me, it was a fight on who was going to have the Sports Illustrated.
Right.
Usually we'd be reading it with an older brother standing over me, telling me I was such a slow reader. But May 10th, 1976, and the title of the article was Tennis is in the Stone Ages. And really, it still is. Vic said this before he passed away. So the internet, I think now is like 30 years old, is so much bad information goes out so fast. And I don't want to be doom and gloom and negative, but are you kidding me? Reminds me, my father's a civil engineer, and I was watching the tennis on TV with him one time. And a world-class player, John Newcomb, great charisma. He comes on the screen and he takes the racket and goes, you have to come over the ball. And my father says, what do you think? And I was having my Braden background by that time. I said, well, what do you think? And he said, the ball hit you in the foot. And I said, yeah, exactly. So my father loved golf. So I said to him, who would you rather have help you with your golf game? This is funny. I said, somebody who's like a great technician or Arnold Palmer. He thought about it for a second. He said, Arnold Palmer.
Exactly. No, I think that's the truth about coaching, especially at a high level. You got those celebrity coaches and whatnot. But just information, Vic Braden, he took it to the masses, which, I think some people, think that he was away from high performance, although he did a lot of consulting.
Well, it's funny now. Back in the day, so I put myself in a position where I was at the Vic Braden Tennis College. That's a funny story too, is that Tommy Fye, Walla Walla, Washington. Vic loved Tommy Fye. Everybody, he was just such a great, on the running court, there was nobody like Tom Fye. Funny guy. So I'm into Roosevelt, the hotel in New York City, U.S. Open, the Tennis Teachers Conference. And, Bollettieri, indirectly, I've had a lot to do with Nick as well. But, because there's so many things that where my students ended up working for Nick. So Nick is lecturing on forehands and backhands, and Tom Fye's across the hall, just on the other side of the convention room, where they had a tennis court laid out, half a tennis court. He's raises his hand. And, then later in life, Nick and Vic became really good friends. At one time, their name was on the same tennis school. Mm-hmm. So Fye kept raising his hand about, the geometry of the court, a Bradenism. This would be appropriate for our first podcast. The dimensions of the court and physical laws dictate stroke production. No coach's opinion or unique theory. Yeah. And Bollettieri, and if anyone saw his Hall of Fame speech at the International Tennis Hall of Fame, he started off with number 10, goes down to number 0. 10 was 10 number ones. 9 was 9 lives. 8 was 8 marriages, but only 7 was 7 wives. And he keeps going down, and then he gets to 0. And he goes, number of books that I've read. So there's a lot to be said about volunteering, but he was not an information guy. So he
great motivator.
So he tells Tom Fye, he said, I didn't even like high school geometry. I skipped class. And he goes, I just know angles. So I just knew by the questions Fye was asking that he worked for Braden. I just knew he worked for Braden. So at that time, I had already been to Vic's school for courses, for coaches.
Mm-hmm.
So I went over and introduced myself to Tom Fye and said, hey, you work for Vic Braden. How do you work for Vic Braden? And then he told me how. And I said, well, I've already been through the course. So what I did is I went to the very next one. It was like 6 months later. But through Tom Fye, and I'm not an academic whiz kid, but it was my second time going through it. But I had the highest score on that test. Mm-hmm. They had a 200 question test. So hockey was a drug when I was growing up, but then tennis teaching, Braden information, and it's really something that needs to be resurfaced because facts are facts. I mean,
yep.
I always tell people if you're sitting in Arthur Ashe Stadium and there's 20 seats for 23,000 people, how many people sitting there? They all love tennis to varying degrees, but how many know how long the tennis court is?
Yeah.
And if you don't know the dimensions of the court, and what makes the ball go this way?
I think that's one of our biggest goals is just to keep the torch going, obviously with Vic and some of these other pillars that you've mentioned, Dennis and Welby. And we're, starting to do that. Facebook, we've had a following. You've done that for many years, and now Instagram, YouTube. We're just getting started. So if you're listening at home, you can definitely check out our free content on our website, GreatBaseTennis.com, and then as well as Instagram, we're posting daily. Facebook, we're posting daily. Over 3,000 posts on Facebook, I believe. And we're just going to keep the ball rolling.
I think one thing helping tennis has become too expensive. And tennis teaching is information transfer. Mm-hmm. And it would be great to, and again, it does circle back for me. When I was 26, Vic Braden, Dennis Vandermeer, and Welby Van Horn, their work together. And certainly there was others. I think of Don Leary, who wrote the Teaching Pro, and he's got the word picture method. So we take his idea, the word picture method, and we take, Braden science, we take Vandermeer progressions, and Van Horn balance, and we put it together. And really the proof's in the pudding. Vic would always say that, the umpire is going to say ready, play.
Exactly.
And I think another sad note, doom and gloom. I understand where college coaches are recruiting. That makes sense. The word academy, you have to give Nick credit for that.
Yeah.
He had a military background, and I went to a boarding school called an academy, and typically that word was not used in tennis. Nick was first, and now everything's an academy. Mm-hmm. Really what kids need is they need a pre-academy. Mm-hmm. You can't microwave tennis, as I said earlier. But with the GreatBase, it's unfortunate. We have a large network of coaches, and they send us players, and someone will be sent to us, and they're 15 years old. So the number one thing is prevention of injury. Mm-hmm. They're 15 years old, and the light at the end of the tunnel is a train coming right at them. I mean, they have a faulty service motion. They don't get their racket below the ball on either side, and they only go to the net to pick up balls and shake hands. And now, granted, if someone's like top 10 kid in the country and they're ready to sign a $250,000 scholarship, rightfully so, you can work within that player's game. But, Vic, and again, you were with him the last part of his life. He did so much work with the brain that, really that's what you're doing. The athlete's a biocomputer, and they need to be programmed. So the GreatBase, ideally, it should be for early childhood development. And when it comes down to parents, and if parents were to go through our course, for example, the one it's called GreatBase Initiative, mm-hmm. It's just an hour and a half, and then go to work. And when it comes down to just a video analysis, an out-of-body experience, standing in front of a mirror, it's an out-of-body experience. Mm-hmm. And Vandermeer was awesome. He was a genius. Trickery, he would just say those little buggers. When it comes down to having a form tournament, if we had posters of Serena Williams and Roger Federer, these great players in certain positions, because the human eye doesn't see fast enough to register 24 frames per second related to a camera. So you're giving kids prizes. You're tricking them into, okay, let's play statue. Let's shake hands with a giant.
Yeah.
And I think it's really a crisis where, let's watch someone like, Rafael Nadal, such a classy champion, with, how he's playing at the end of the rainbow.
Mm-hmm.
He had a two-handed forehand almost all the way through the 12s.
Yeah.
And, so that's where with YouTube and kids watching and going, well, being a copycat, if you go out and watch junior tennis and say, well, I've been here 3 days, I haven't seen anybody hit an overhead. We would love to help tennis. And when it comes down to it, to use my name in third person, it's not Steve Smith stuff.
Yeah.
And, when it comes down to, people say, well, Vic's work is not relevant today. I mean, can we
Physical
agree?
laws and the dimensions of the court are the same.
Yeah. Can we agree that the tennis court's a rectangle and water runs downhill? And, you just think of other sports. We watched that documentary, Last Dance, Michael Jordan, like from another planet. What an athlete.
Yep.
But his sport, he had to stand in one place and make the shot.
Yeah.
And most D1 basketball players, the number's 300. Practice is over. They have to stay and make 300 shots.
Yeah.
The managers are quickly returning the balls to them so they can do it and save time and go to the library or wherever they got to do. But, make the shot.
Yep.
So I look forward to it with podcast number 1.
Yeah. I mean, the importance of a great base, it gives you a little bit of our history of the great base, the logo, we covered that, and the pillars. One last thought, you're talking about Michael Jordan and basics, to think of Roger Federer, and I always relate it to, kit cars where, from the outside, it may look like a Ferrari, but the engine on the inside, you don't really see how that was built. And we know that from Roger's history, his mom used to say that when he took his earliest lessons, that he would stay in one place and hit and hold and be there on balance. And even when you watch early film of Roger, you can just see where the basics were all there. But kids try to copy that the way he looks right now after building that engine over the years, and they try to copy it, and it's just not the same because...
Yeah, for sure. With Roger Federer, Adolf Kavoski, they called him Seppi, his first coach. If you're going to interview someone about Roger Federer at age 8, you need to interview his mother, Lynette. You know, what's Roger going to tell you he was doing at age 8?
Exactly.
That's one thing that certainly helped me is I really was learning tennis as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, starting the game really late. It's in a biography. I think the author is Chris Bowers. I think it's verbatim. Roger's lessons were 1 hour long. He stood in one place with long follow-throughs.
Yeah.
And so to go back, why don't you go through Mike Larscheid, one of our coaches. Why don't you do that and we can sign off?
Yeah, no, I love that analogy boards. Mike talks about when you're learning the ABCs that, you really just learn the basic form of the letter A, the letter B, the letter C. And that's your bowl and ice cream. That's the vanilla, right? Just the basics, ABC. And then you learn cursive. So it becomes a little more fluid and signature-like, but still it's easy to see it. You can see it, but it's not quite the block letter. And then you get your signature where, it can be kind of funky and you can kind of catch, the A here or the B there, but you can see it, but it's your own signature. And when he relates that to the pro game, I think that's awesome because kids typically try to copy the signature. It's hard for them to see, okay, what are the nuts and bolts? What are the real basic ABCs in there, the bowl and the ice cream, the nuts and bolts? And I think that's one of our goals is to try to get, hey, these are some basic fundamentals. Here's the dimension of the court. Here's physical laws. It's going to work. But oftentimes people, get confused about that. But
no, what Mike says is it's unjust. It's unjust. You're talking just these kids that are 10 and under, and they're going to eat it up. Where they're whiz kids on the YouTube and they can watch, but misinterpret what someone like say Nadal is doing.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I was with JJ Wolf. We had the opportunity to practice with Roger for a 2-hour session at Cincinnati. And afterward, we got to talk with Roger, and, for quite a while. And he was giving JJ advice. And he said, you want to learn from the best. And not just technically, but all kinds of things, how you prepare and whatnot. But he said, I'm a difficult person to copy. And so, you look at his background with Federer, maybe the greatest player of all time, but, his background with skiing and badminton and fine motor skill and all those kind of things, to really go, okay, to get his skill, it's a lifetime of different experiences.
Oh, for sure. Growing up in Switzerland and playing on red clay, his mother being an Afrikaner, Roger Federer. If you read about Roger, just so many things. Roger Federer stories where, he made fun of a girl who couldn't speak Swiss German, a Turkish girl, and his mother made him apologize in writing and orally in Turkish.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, for someone like Roger Federer, even his wife, who's 3 years older, and he just read. She's the one with the discipline. She was a world-class tennis player until I think it was an ankle injury. But actually, when it comes down to a Bradenism, the top players don't say what they do or do what they say.
Yeah.
Coming back to that analogy with print cursive in your autograph signature. Yeah. If you want a tennis lesson, go to an instructor. If you want inspiration, go to a jazz concert. You're not going to ask that man or woman on the saxophone that hits that one note. How do you do that? So there's so many subtleties and nuances at the highest level. But if you study all of sport, the great Lombardi was misinterpreted. Winning's not everything; it's the only thing. Well, but also to be brilliant with basics.
Yeah.
And John Wooden, the basketball coach. I have a film upstairs where it's a very boring film. He's showing kids how to put on a sweat sock. No, we're gonna wear 2 pairs of socks. No one's gonna have a blister.
Yeah.
And he, it's great to read, Mike Walton, where he treated everybody like they were a beginner. We're gonna go back to basics.
Yep.
I mentioned one of my brothers who had a hockey background professionally, being a scout, a coach, general manager in the NHL. There's no difference between peewee hockey and NHL hockey. It's just the speed of the game. A Woodenism is the fundamental doesn't change. The speed at which you can execute that fundamental changes.
Yeah, I love that.
I think with each of the people I mentioned, there's many, many more too. So we have this course, Tennis Intelligence Applied. If people go through that, we want to redo that. Our plans, as you know, are to redo that.
Yep.
But just in that course, we mentioned over 100 coaches. So the great base is not one-dimensional, and to repeat, it's not Steve Smith stuff.
Yeah, exactly.